Good evening on this January 15th. This is Stacy Sanderson, and I'm a psychotherapist who, for this purpose, am just offering up some information, hopefully food for thought, about narcissism and narcissistic recovery. And I just want to clarify my reason for doing so. I mean, obviously, I want to help people and see people along their healing journey, but I do this because I believe that so many of you, when you are healed and when you are empowered, have so much to offer the world. And I also am doing this work as a way of changing perhaps decades long patterns as well. And along those lines, and with that idea in mind, I'm going to begin a series of talks about narcissistic family systems. Now, I debated doing this before Christmas, but it just didn't feel right. And I ended up doing a bunch of talks and podcasts about, coping with people who are narcissistic throughout the holiday season. Sorry, not just over Christmas, but really, through those high holiday weeks in December. I think that I have an unconscious association with Christmas that comes out when I talk about that. So why talk about the narcissistic family system? And what is a narcissistic family system? We refer to families as systems in that there are moving bits and pieces where people get their needs met. It is very systemic. It is a system, it has rules, it has patterns, it is working from an inherited blueprint of what's normal. Okay, so for all of those reasons, we'll refer to it as a system. And you're going to see me glance at my notes so that I stay on track. We're focusing on this because this is often the beginning point of people's narcissistic wounding from their childhood experiences. So that's why we're beginning with that. Let's consider first a healthy family system. So in a healthy family system, everyone is getting their needs met in appropriate ways, right? It's kind of the definition of healthy or functional in the context of family. So that would mean, parents get their needs met. The adults have their needs met through, their primary romantic committed relationship or through other adult relationships, and through perhaps work or volunteer work or their role as parent. But they are not using children to have ego needs met. They're not using their children as a form of ego or narcissistic supply. So there's the difference. It is a bit of a top-down way of thinking about it, in that I believe there is somewhat of a family hierarchy. I know there's a lot of people who would disagree with me, but the truth is adults do carry a lot of power and children do look to adults for safety. And so keeping that in mind, there is definitely a family hierarchy. This hierarchy is different in a narcissistic family system for all kinds of reasons, but primarily it's because there is a distortion of, at the top, we have the narcissistic parent or parents who are in power, but then they also get a certain amount of needs met from their children, which inverts that hierarchy and distorts those power relationships. There's an implicit goal within a healthy family system that children are going to work toward a level of independence and individuation, and they become people separate from their parents and therefore don't need those parents, at various different junctures. So it's kind of an unwritten, unspoken rule that as we're parenting or as we're being parented, That's what we are building toward. This is not the case in a narcissistic family system. And I was thinking about this as I was writing it, because I like to organize my thoughts in writing. Your relationship with your narcissistic parent is going to shift along the junctures of your developmental trajectory. So that is to say, the older or younger you are, the differences there will be in your relationship with them. I wrote a blog piece on the website about your aging narcissistic parent, and that got me thinking about that, right? I think it's probably one of the most difficult chapters in a narcissistic family system, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. So the focus of this chat is the early years for a child in this narcissistic family system. A dear friend of mine has written a book called Unmet Needs Never Go Away. And so you'll see that interview with my friend Brenda on the YouTube channel. But that's really inspired me to go in and take a closer look at narcissistic family systems and what that means for younger children. So again, children in narcissistic systems are not allowed that basic right to self-determination, individuation, sovereignty, becoming their own person, because that process is threatening to the narcissist. There is commonly the idea that infants, babies, toddlers get their needs met just fine in these maladaptive family systems. Sometimes that's true, sometimes it is not. There is also a belief that narcissistic family systems look really good to the outside world. Also, not always true, and I believe is indicative of a real white Anglo-Saxon middle class, middle to upper class socioeconomic bias on the subject, which you will repeatedly hear me call out. I really like to be inclusive in the work that I do, and I'm just going to say it can be obvious to the outside world that a family is not working well, and that all of the children in the family are not having their needs met. That being said, there can very much also be narcissistic family systems where there are some rules around perfectionism and making the parents look good to the outside world. So it's a little bit of both. Needless to say, that may or may not be as obvious when we're talking about a baby or a small child. I think that even when we're not talking about a narcissistic family system, it's even as babies that we begin this process of intermittent reinforcement. I mean, how many times have we heard that a baby is a good baby because they've slept through the night and not disrupted their parents, right? It's embedded in the culture. It is shifting, it is changing, as we move toward a different model of conscious and attachment and attuned parenting. But it still exists. It certainly existed in my generation. So my point here is babies can, first of all, pick up on the stress and the inner regulation of a parent in the womb. Keeping in mind, narcissists are constantly emotionally dysregulated. Number one. So you can easily have a narcissistic mother who gives birth to a child who may have difficulty with emotional regulation or maybe a bit more demanding, if you will, if I can put it that way. And so begins this distorted dance of attachment with the narcissist and their small child. I believe that infants, babies, toddlers, preschoolers can even represent that idealized love object or objectified love. Interest isn't quite the right word, but they're meeting this need that the narcissist has for someone to treat them like they're special and to be loved very uniquely, right? So in the DSM, that's referred to as, their fantasies of idealized love. And in the extreme, this can turn into grooming and emotional incest. Okay, so that's on the extreme end as a parent treats a child as if they are special in some way. So we are, of course, setting the stage here for the roles that those children will play in the family system, or if there's only one of them, still they're going to be playing some roles. So we're setting the stage for that here. But so begins, lifelong patterns of something called intermittent reinforcement. This is when you are rewarded, perhaps with the appearance of love, if you're doing what that parent wants, and you are punished or you are dismissed or ignored if you're doing something that the parent doesn't want you to do. So what I'm presenting here is just an explanation of the early years, if you will, in a narcissistic family system. I'm being quite specific about that, and I'm going to move across, the various developmental maps, and I may weave in a little bit of, the stages of development, right? So yes, there's a commonly held notion that infants, babies, toddlers, preschoolers can have their needs met within these systems. And I think that might be true because there's less of that psychic demand, right, on the parent. They're not being questioned. They're still very much in a place of power. And this child is very adoring at this stage of development, or at least they can be. Although I do also think there is a risk if a parent is prone to depression, keeping in mind narcissism is an axis 2 disorder, so there can be a high comorbidity of depression or other mental health issues that can get in the way of that attachment and attunement parenting. And a narcissistic parent may also have an unrealistic expectation that a baby is going to fulfill a need. And so there can be a detachment on the parent's part if that's not happening. So just something to keep in mind. And again, there would still be this focus on the child not disrupting the parent's needs, right? There would still very much be that focus. So this is where those seeds are planted as the narcissistic family system changes and doesn't grow really. But this is the beginning of other phases and stages that we're going to talk about. So keep in mind, all stages of human development are moving toward individuation and being a successful, independent human. And so we're going to be examining how this is distorted and influenced if you have a parent or parents who are narcissistic. So the next chat I am going to give here will be looking at those next phases in a child's development. And I'll be weaving in little bits of information, more information on the topic of narcissistic families and narcissistic parents. So please, if this has resonated with you, like, subscribe, comment. I love engagement in the comments, simultaneously trying to build community. Head to my website, look at all the content that is there. Look me up on social media where you will find a general page as well as a very private group for survivors called Inquire Within, Finding and Nurturing Your True Self. So I'd also love to see you there. So until we meet again in the next chat.